Hello and welcome to Column Cymru revision sessions. This session will focus on Maths GCSE and will be presented by myself, Mrs Claire Dixon from Pentre Harvard School. The session will last around 45 minutes where I will go through the relevant subject content. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to do percentages today. This is a non-calculator lesson, okay, so that's throughout the whole lesson. So you should not need to use a calculator at all if you're following this session. The sessions that we've done so far, okay, we've had session 1 and session 2, and today is session 3, the percentages non-calculator. Next week will be percentages with using a calculator, and then after that will be the live session where we will do a recap of everything that we followed for the last 4 weeks. For today, we are doing the intermediate tier, and this here is the extract from the WJC, and we are going to look at this part here that's now in red. So finding a fraction or percentage of a quantity, and then expressing one number as a fraction and so on. Okay, so that section of work there, the bit that's underlined just means that it's in the intermediate tier, as well as the bit that's not underlined is foundation. Okay, so there's a crossover of topics here. So we're going to start. We're going to get, the beginning is just going to be practicing what hopefully you do already know. And the first thing is question 1, convert the following decimals to percentages. And then question 2, I'm asking you to calculate. Now, calculate does not mean use a calculator. It means to work out. Okay, so if you pause the video now and have a go at those questions, if you are struggling to start, then I'll give you some hints in about 10 seconds. Okay, so if you're struggling to start, it's to convert a decimal to a percentage. Then think about the word percent. Per means out of and cent is 100. So percent means out of 100. So we're going to be multiplying by 100. Okay, so have a go at question 1 if you weren't able to start that one. Okay, you're multiplying by 100 and that will be your percent. For question 2, to give you some hints, you can use the bus stop method, or if you're dividing by 10, you can think about digits moving that way. Okay, pause the video and have a go at that if you weren't able to at the start. Okay then, so I'm going to start going through the answers. So like I said, with question 1, we're multiplying by 100. Okay, so if we're timesing 0.25 by 100, then that will give us our percentage, which means that the first one is 25%. Every time we are going to multiply by 100. So here, when we multiply by 100, the digits move to the left 2 places. So the 3 is going to jump from the tenths column into the units and then again into the tens. So even though it looks like there's only one digit here, because that 3 is going into the tens column, we have to fill that gap with a 0. So it becomes 30%. Multiplying the next one by 100 will be 87%. And again, the last one by 100 will be 6% there. Okay, lovely. And then the division at the bottom, when you're dividing by 10, like I mentioned above, you can be thinking about moving the digits. When we divide by 10, we move the digits to the right. So because the 6 is already in the units column, moving that to the right will mean that is a 0.6. Okay, right then, when it comes to B and C, because we're not dividing by 10, 100, 1,000, I'm going to look to use the bus stop method. So the bottom number, the dividing number, goes on the outside, so 60 on the outside, 12 underneath, and you'll ask yourself how many 60s go into 1. The answer is 0, so we carry the 1 on. 60s into 12, again, is 0, so we need to carry the 12 on, but it looks like we haven't got anything else here. So what we can do at this stage is put a decimal point in for the 12 and on the answer line, and we can write as many zeros as we want after this. We can keep going and going. It's not going to change our value of the 12. It's still going to be 12 there. Okay, so the 12 we didn't use now gets carried on to be 120. So how many 60s in 120? Well, 2 exactly. There are no remainders, so actually I didn't need those zeros in the end, but they're not causing any harm. So our answer here, and we don't need the 2 zeros written at the start, so 0.2. The C, 100 divided by 120. Okay, we're going to actually divide them both by 10 to make the calculation a little bit easier. So we've got 10 divided by 12 is exactly the same calculation as 100 divided by 120. And then 12 as the denominator, so that's on the outside. And then 10 underneath with a few zeros as well. 12 doesn't go into 10, so I can carry that 10 on. So now I've got to think about how many 12s go into 100. Now we can get to 96 in the 12 times table, and that comes to 8, and there's 4 remainder. So now I've got how many 12s into 40? Well, that goes into 36 3 times, but I've still got a remainder here, so I'm going to keep going. But what's going to happen is that this is going to just keep repeating, and I'm going to keep having this 3. So when you get questions like that, that is called recurring. So the 8 isn't recurring, it's the 3. So the 3 will have the little dot above it to mean that that's going to keep going and going. Okay, so 0.83 recurring there. Okay, so that's the end of the starter. So we're now going to begin with finding a percentage of a quantity. Now in the yellow box you can see on the screen, I've given you some hints. Now these are quite the basic ones, okay? This would be what you would learn in the foundation level, but you need to know it in order to progress now for intermediate. So if you are not sure of this, okay, what you can do now is pause the video, make yourself a little note, take a screenshot of that, okay, and get that written down somewhere so you can refer back to that now as we go through the lesson. So 50% is divided by 2, 25 divided by 4, 10% is divided by 10, and then 1% you divide it by 100. Okay, so we're going to use these rules. So pause the video, have a quick go of those 4 questions. They shouldn't take you too long at all. Okay, literally a minute or so, and then back to me. Okay, pause the video and do that now. Okay, so I'm going to start again. So 50% we said on the last slide was dividing by 2. So 90 divided by 2. Dividing by 2 is exactly the same as halving. So 45 for that one. Okay, check your answers and mark them correct. Or if you need to make alterations, have a look at the method that's being used here. The next one, 1,200. We're going to divide by 4 this time because it's 25%. That's the same as quartering, which is halving and halving again. Okay, so that will bring you to 300. Number 3, 80 is going to be dividing by 10 because it's 10%. 80 divided by 10 is 8. And then the final one on this slide, 150. We're going to divide by 100 because we're finding 1%. And if you think back to our starter, when we're dividing by 10 or 100, we can move our digits to the right. So because it's 100, we're moving them to the right 2 places. So that 150 will become 1.5, or if you want to 1.50, but the 0 is not needed after the end of your values on the decimal there. Okay. Right, we need to build on this, okay? Unfortunately, we're not going to have questions that are just 50, 25, 10, and 1%. We've got to then use that to help us. So we're going to start by looking at using the 10% to build that up to find things like 20%, 30%, 40%. Okay, so you can see on the method box here how to do it. So 20%, you're going to start by dividing by 10, so that'll actually calculate what 10% is. And then once you've got that answer, you're going to multiply by 2. Same for 30%, you're going to divide by 10, but multiply by 3. And that pattern will keep going. Okay, so again, make yourself those little notes, pause the video if you need to write that down, but you can keep referring back to that then through the lesson. So what I'd like you to do now is pause this video and have a go with the 3 questions you can see on the screen. Okay, so finding 30%. So the method for finding 30% is to divide by 10, that will find 10%. And once we've got that answer, we're going to multiply by 3. Okay, now the number we've got in this question is 40. So that means 40 will be divided by 10. That's going to give me 4. And then I'm going to times that answer by 3 to bring me back up to 12. So 30% of 40 is 12. Now 60% wasn't on the last slide, but you could have used the same pattern here. Okay, so we're going to start with 2,500. We're going to divide by 10 to find 10%. And then to get from 10 up to 60, we need to multiply by 6. Okay, so 2,500 divided by 10 is 250. So I need to work out what 250 multiplied by 6 is. That answer is 1,500. And then the final one, 40%. So the number we've got is 6, so we're going to divide it by 10. So that will actually go into decimals. And then we're going to multiply by 4 to get that back to 40%. So 6 divided by 10 is 0.6. Okay, we're moving those digits to the right and they only go in one place when it's dividing by 10. But we still need to multiply that by 4. So you can think of this in your head as 6 times 4. 6 times 4 is 24. But then we've got that one digit that's after the decimal place. So we need the one digit after as well. So 2.4 for that question. Okay, so if you need to refer back to the previous slide, obviously you can pause and go back a little bit in the video to have a look at those rules again if anything confused you at all there. So very similar to that, our next section is how we would build up to the smaller percentages, so 2%, 3%, 4%. Now this is based on the 1%. So you can see that the rule at the start is to divide by 100, and that's the same for all of them. That divide by 100 will work out what 1% of the number is. So then to build back up to whatever percentage we want, we'll then multiply by that number. Okay, so use those rules again, write them down if you need to, pause if you need to, get those rules written down, and then you can use them then to answer the task questions on the next slide. Okay, so there's 3 questions there for you to try. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, so I'm going to come in and work out these so you can check your answers. So you should have already worked these out yourself now. So to find 5%, we're going to stick to the same rules. So we're going to do 90 divided by 100 multiplied by 5. Now, there is actually another way of working out 5%. Well, there's a few ways actually. But what you could have done from what we've done in this lesson already is to find 10% and half it. That will work. Okay, we'll perhaps use that later on. Or you could say, right, how many 5s going to 100 is 20. So I could just divide the 90 by 20. Okay, so there's various ways you can do it, but I'll use this process now to show you how to do this way. So 90 divided by 100, that will give you 0.9. So we are going into decimals again, but we still then have to multiply by 5 to get the answer we require. So 9 5s are 45. So that means 0.9 times 5 will be 4.5. Okay, question 2. 3,600, we're going to divide by 100 to find 1%, and then we're going to multiply by 4 to get that back to 4%. Okay, so dividing by 100 will be 36, and we still need to times that by 4, so 144. And then question 3, we're going to do 4 divided by 100. We're going to times that answer then by 7 to get the 7% that we want. So 4 divided by 100 is actually 0.04. Okay, we've moved 2 places for the digits that time. 4 7s are 28, but we need 2 digits to be after the decimal, so 0.28 there. Okay, so that's the end of that task. Now, there's another question now, which is a worded question. And this worded question is regarding trainers. Okay, so I'll read through it. We'll pick out the key information. Let me just get my highlighter up. So we have a pair of trainers are in a sale. So a sale means that there's obviously going to be a reduction, isn't it? The price is going to go down. Okay, so they were originally £60. They have 15% off. How much money do I save? Okay. So there is a percentage and obviously a number, a quantity in here that we need to work with. So we need to find 15%. Now we didn't do this in the previous ones. We did things like 10, 20, 30, and we've done the 1, 2, 3s, okay? So what we can do is actually break 15% into 10%, add 5%. Okay, so we can work these out and then add our answers. So we now know how to find 10%. We divide by 10. So this is going to be 60 divided by 10. That's going to give you 6. Okay. Now to find 5%, I mentioned already there's various ways. Now because you've already found 10%, the easiest thing for you to do now is to find 5% is to half that number. So the answer we had for 10% was 6. So half of 6 will tell me what the 5% is. And then we can get our answer for 15% by adding together those two. So 6 add 3 means that I save £9. Okay, so that can be done by breaking up your percentages and working out the ones you know how to use. Okay, so the next question now I want you to try. So pause the video. I'm just going to put my lights back on because I can see I've gone quite dark. So pause the video and have a go at that. I'm just going to be back in 1 second once I've got my lights on. Okay, so we're on to, hopefully you paused the video and had to go with that one. So I'm going to run through this with you now. So it says, a pair of designer sunglasses are in a sale. Again, okay, sale means the money is coming off. So they were originally £150. They have 24% off. How much money do I save? Now, we're going to have to break this 24% up. Okay, so what I know I can work out is 20% and 4%. So I'm going to do these calculations separately, and then I'm going to bring them back together to answer the question. So to find 20%, I'm going to do 10%, and that is by dividing by 10. So 150 divided by 10 is going to give me 15. And then to get the 20%, I'm going to double that answer. So 15 times 2 is £30. Okay, so 20% will give me £30. I am finished because I need 24%. So now I need to leave those calculations and start again. So to get 4%, I'm going to do 1% by doing 150 divided by 100, which is £1.50. Okay, and then 4% will then be that times 4. Oh, I'm writing 4 because I'm saying 4. So £1.50 times by 4. And that will give me that part is £6. So the question was asking for about 24% because that's how much I'm going to save. So that will be the £30 that I had for the 20 and the £6 I've had for the 4. So £36 is the answer. Okay, so I save £36. Right, so that's the end of our percentage of quantity parts. The next part of what I showed you at the start of what was going to be there for the WJC was the expressing one number as a percentage of another. Okay, so I'm going to go on to that now. So again, the success criteria, okay, so there's methods there for you. So if you'd like to pause and write those methods down, okay, or get a photo of them, then please do. So we have write the numbers as a fraction is the first step. And then we're going to convert the fraction so it has a denominator of 100. So that's if it works out nicely. Okay, or work out the numerator divided by the denominator, and then we're going to multiply by 100. Okay, there's different methods depending on the numbers we have, and I'll show you those ways now as we go through this. So the first question I've got here is express 15 as a percentage of 20. Okay, so the first thing in the success criteria was to write that as a fraction. So that is 15 out of 20. Now, because the denominator 20 goes into 100 quite nicely, it goes in 5 times, there's no remainders or anything, what I can do is multiply the entire fraction by 5. And that includes the numerator, which is the top, and the denominator, the bottom. Okay, so 15 multiplied by 5 is 75. 20 multiplied by 5 is 100. Now, going back to breaking down the word percentage, per and cent is out of 100. So by getting that fraction to have a denominator of 100, that means I can just use what's on the numerator as the answer for the percentage. So as long as the denominator is 100, then the numerator is then the percentage answer for that, okay? So 75% there. Okay, so can you now pause the video and have a go at the ones on the screen? So there are 6 questions. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to pause it and I'll come back in with the answers. Right then, so question 1, 83 out of 100. So 83 out of 100 as a fraction, that's already out of 100. So as a percent, straight away, I don't have to do anything, it's just 83%. Okay. Question 2, 24 out of 50. Now then, because that's out of 50, I need to double. I need to get that to be 100. So this is going to turn into 48 out of 100. It's an equivalent fraction, but because now the denominator is 100, I can work with that. So it's 48% was your answer for number 2. Number 3, you would have had 9 out of 25 as your fraction to start. Now, because 25 goes into 100 4 times, we're going to times by 4, giving you 36 out of 100, meaning that that question 3 answer should have been 36%. Question 4, starting is 7 out of 20. Now 20 goes into 100 5 times, so we times by 5. So that's now 35 out of 100, giving you 35% for that question. Okay, so we got 2 more to do. I'm going to move over to the right-hand side. Question 5, 6 out of 10. 10 goes into 100 10 times, so it times in by 10, giving you 60 out of 100, 60%. And the final question. Now then, 24 out of 60 looks as if it doesn't work nicely into 100. You think, well, 60, counting in 60s doesn't get me there. But you can actually simplify, cancel the fraction down, and then build back up. So if I start by dividing by 6, because I know 6 goes into 24 and 6 goes into 60, that will give me a new fraction, an equivalent fraction of 4 out of 10. Now I still haven't got to 100, but this fraction, I know I can build back up. So I could times by 10 now to get 40 out of 100. And then I have my answer. Okay, so potentially you might have to simplify a fraction before you can get it to be equivalent to 100 then. Okay, moving on. So the next one is a worded question. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is have a read. So we're going to read this together. Let me just get my highlighter. So it says, in a class of 32 students, 12 of them are boys. Okay, so there's 12 boys. What percentage are boys? So we start in exactly the same way. 12 of them are boys out of 32. Now, this isn't going to go, even if I simplify, I'm not going to be able to get to 100 easily. Okay, so this is a different style. This was like the second method on the success criteria I showed you earlier. So this is going back to similar what we did in our Do It Now, where we needed to use the bus stop. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to do it over on the right-hand side. So 32 is the dividing number, so that's going to go on the outside, and 12 underneath. I'm going to already put in a decimal point with a few zeros. Okay, I might have to add to that in a minute, I don't know yet. So I've got, how many 32s in 12? Now, I don't know about you, but knowing your 32 times table off the top of your head isn't easy. So what you can do is just spend a few seconds just writing them down by just simply adding. But when they're at the side of your page, it'll make it a lot easier to just be able to answer the question. Okay, so I'm going to have to go over my diagram here. So 224, and then the final one, 256 at the bottom there. Okay, so 32 doesn't go into 12, so I'm going to carry that 12 on. So I've then got how many 32s are in 120. Now I can see from what I've just written down, 128 is there, but that's too big. So I can only have the first 3. So I was going to have 3 here. Now that got me to 96, which means my remainder up to 120 is 24. So I've now got 240. And again, look down the list. I can get to 224, and that's 7 times. But that's not the, there's no Sorry, there's more remainders. That's not the end of it. Okay, so I'm going to have to extend my division and do another 0. From 224 up to 240, there's a remainder of 16. So I've now got 160. Now 160 is here. It's the 5th one down. Okay, so it's that. So 0.375. Now multiplying that by 100, because that was part of the success criteria, will turn that into a percentage. So that means our percentage is 37.5%. Okay, so there's 2 questions for you to try. Pause the video and have a go at those, please. Right then, so I'm going to read through them and work them out with you now for your answers. So George scored 12 out of 15. So that's the fraction, okay? So 12 over 15. Again, this isn't going to go into 100. So on the sides of my page, I'm going to do 12 divided by 15 using the bus stop. So I'm going to have a few zeros there. Okay, so 15 does not go into 12, so I'm going to carry my 12 on. Actually, using the bus stop, we're going to keep going, aren't we? Okay, so we got 15 into 120. Now again, if you don't know your 15 times table, you can just write them on the edge of the page by just adding 15s, so that you can hopefully check the answers and you're quite confident then with what you've got. Okay, so we get to 120 and you can count up how many you've used. You've used 8, there's no remainders. So 12 out of 15 should have been 0.8. And then to turn that into a percent, we are multiplying by 100. So 80% then would be the answer to the first question. Now you need to be careful with question 2. 14 out of 21 apples were mouldy. What percentage were not mouldy? Okay, so there's 2 ways of doing this. You can work out the percentage for mouldy and take away from 100, or you can work out how many apples were not mouldy and use that from the start. Okay, so that's the way I'm going to do it. So if there's 14 that are mouldy, that means there must be 7 that are not, because it's got to make a total of 21. So 7 out of 21. Now I can use my equivalent fractions rules here and think, right, okay, well 7 and 21 are both in the 7 times table. So let's divide by 7 to make the fraction a little bit smaller, cancel down. So we've got 1 over 3 when we divide by 7. Now, if you don't know what 1 over 3 is, 1/3 is a decimal. Okay, you can use the bus stop, but I'm going to write it here now. It's 0.3 recurring. And again, we've seen this recurring before, where that means the 3 goes on. So at this stage, when you multiply by 100, you're then going to have 33.3, and those 3's are going to carry on. So we still have the recurring dot, but obviously 2 of the digits have moved to the left because we've multiplied that by 100. Okay, the next part is the same topic, but it's now with different units. So we've got express 75 centimetres as a percentage of 2.5 metres. Okay, so these need to be always in the same units. Now, the easiest thing to do is to get them into the smallest measurement. So this one is going to be the centimetres. So I'm actually going to convert this 2.5 metres into centimetres. Now, there's 100 centimetres in a metre. So that means I'm going to do 2.5 multiplied by 100, giving me 250 centimetres. Okay, so instead of using the 2.5 metres as given in the question, I'm going to use 250. Now, once you've done that conversion, the rest is what we've already been doing. So 75 on the top, 250 on the bottom. Again, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller actually. I'm going to divide by 5. I can see 5 goes into both of them. So 5 goes into 75 15 times. 5 goes into 250 50 times. Now, I could sit there and use the bus stop now, but I know I can get 50 to go into 100 by doubling. So if I now double the fraction, okay, the numerator and denominator there, I'm going to have 30 out of 100, which means the answer was 30%. Okay, so 30 is our numerator, remember, from there. Okay, so can you pause the video and try that next question regarding time, please? Apologies. Oh my gosh. I had a sip of water. It went down the wrong way. I've got to carry on. Okay, so 45 minutes. My voice is gone now. And 2 hours. So 2 hours. And there are 60 minutes in every hour. Okay. So that means 2 hours is 2 lots of 60. So 120 minutes. So when you go to do this, you should have been doing 45 divided by 120. Now looking at that, I'm thinking, okay, I can make it smaller by dividing by 5, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get to 100 that way. So I'm going to do the bus stop method with this one. So I'm going to have 120 on the outside, 45 underneath the bus stop, and then a few zeros to help me as I go along. So the 120 times table can be obviously very similar to the 12. So you can use your 12 times table to help you write them down. So 120, 240, 360, 480, 600, 720, 840, and 960. Okay, so those are ones we're going to use. Sorry. So 120 does not go into 45. So I know already I'm going to have to carry the 45 over. So that makes the first value 450. So I can get to 480, but that's too big. So it's only the 3 above I can use. And from 360 to 450, there's a 90 remainder. Squashing this in now. I should have spread my zeros off out a little bit more. So 900, I can get to 840 by using 7 of them. That'll then give me 60 remainder. So I've got 600 then as my final value here. 600 is in the 120 times table, so there's 5 times. And that will give me my decimal. But do not leave it like that. Okay, we do need then to multiply by 100. So 37.5% then will be your final answer. Okay, we're going to move on now to percentage change. Okay, so the next slide, you see this slide here is the new formula. So again, write this down. Okay, get yourself some notes. Percentage change is the change divided by the original multiplied by 100. So the first question we're going to look at is to do with a television. So it says a television originally costing £500 is reduced by £30. Calculate the reduction as a percentage of the original price. Okay, now the £500 is the original price. The £30 is the reduction or the change. So if you think of the formula I just showed you, it said that the percentage change was going to be the change, which we now know is £30. So I'm just going to write 30 here, divided by the original, which is, sorry, £500, times by 100. Okay. Now, I know 500, I can get that to be 100 by dividing it by 5. So that means I can do that same to the top as well. So I'm going to actually cancel the fraction down. Okay, so by dividing by 5, it's going to mean I've got 6 as a numerator and 100 as the denominator. Now the multiply by 100 is still there, okay? We haven't just got rid of it. We haven't divided by 5. It's only the fraction part we've cancelled down. So 6 divided by 100, I know it's out of 100. As soon as it's out of 100, the top, the numerator is the percentage. And obviously the 100 and times by 100 here would cancel anyway. So it's 6% for that first one. Okay, so it's the change divided by the original multiplied by 100. So can you try the next question for me? Pause the video and have a go. Okay, so Jane earns £8 an hour. She receives a pay increase of 50p. Calculate her percentage of the original. Okay, so the change is the 50p, but we've got different units here and you need to have them in the same units. Okay, so £8 is 800p. So I'm going to use that for my calculations. So 50p is the change. 800 is what I'm using as the original, not the pounds version, okay? I'm going to get everything in pence. Now I can divide both of those by 10. So that would take me down to 5 out of 80. That makes the fraction look a little bit smaller for me. And then I can do the bus stop. I'm not going to do the bus stop here, okay? So you can do the bus stop method. But when you do 5 divided by 80, what you should have had in the bus stop is 0.0625. Okay, so that calculation is from the bus stop with 80 on the outside and 5 underneath. Okay, so the setting up of that would look like that when you do your division. We're then going to multiply by 100, and that will give me 6.25 then percent. Okay, so that was your answer there. Okay, so we're going to build this up and we're going to look at something called repeated proportional changes. And you will have keywords here. The word appreciation is when the value of an item increases, and depreciation is when the value of the item decreases. Okay, so what we're going to do is repeat these processes. It's not really going to be anything new. It's going to be building on what we've done. So we've got calculate the percentage of the quantities as the first step. And then if we're going to appreciate, we're going to add. And if we're going to depreciate, we're going to subtract. Let's have a little look at the first question. Okay, so Ben puts £300 in a bank at 5% compound interest per year. Okay, how much money will he have in the bank after 2 years? Now, compound interest means that your interest will accumulate. Okay, so at the end of the first year, the bank will put 5% interest into your account. So then when you go to start the second year, you've got a little bit more money in your account. That will then help you for the second year. When you go to work out the percentage for this, the amount of the second year, it won't be the original £300 in the account. It's going to be £300 plus a little bit of interest you've already had. So the second year will actually change the amount. Okay, so we're going to do this in stages. So we're going to work out year one first of all. Now to find 5%, we're going to find 10% by dividing by 10, and then we're going to half it. Okay, so I'm going to divide by 10, divide by 2. I could do that by dividing by 20. I could find 1% by dividing by 100 and times by 5. Okay, so there's various ways of doing this. But when you do 300 divided by 10, you get 30. Half in that, you get 15. Okay, so at the end of the first year, you haven't just got the £300 in the account. You've now got £300, add on the £15 the bank have given you. So there is now £315 in that account. So when you go to calculate year two, you're not starting with £300. You're going to start with £315. And then obviously you need to do another 5%. So we're going to divide by 10 and half. Now that is going to work out to be £15.75. So you can see in the first year, it was actually given £15 interest. In the second year, it was given £15.75. So there's a little bit more money going in every year. And that's what compounding is, compound interest. So at the end of the second year, you've got the £315 you had at the start of that year and another £15.75. So it's now £330.75 in that account. Okay. So there's going to be one question for you to have a go at, and then we're coming to the end of our time then. Okay, so we'll just finish off after that then. So we've got Sally buys a car for £6,000. Car depreciates by 10%. How much is the car worth after 3 years? So pause the video and have a go, but I will carry on now and talk through it for you once you've had a go. Okay, so year one, 10% a year. Okay, so we're going to find that by dividing by 10. So that's £600 lost in the first year. So it's no longer £6,000. I'm going to take away the 600. So the car at the end of the first year is worth £5,400. Year two, you start with the 5,400. You're going to find 10%. So you're dividing by 10, which is 540. And then take it away. And you will have then how much that is worth at the end of the second year. So 4,860. You can see the price is going down each year, which is what you expect is depreciating. Okay, so year 3, 4,860 to start. We're going to find 10%, so that's 486. We're going to take it away, and then you will have your final answer at that stage. I'm going to write it over here when I got a little bit more room. 4,374. Okay, so that once you've subtracted and you've repeated, so a car that was worth £6,000 is now, after 3 years, worth £4,374. Okay, so I'm just going to skip a few here. I'm going to go on to the percentages plenary. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is write down which one of these is the odd one out. So I need you to calculate those percentages of the amounts, and then you'll be telling me which one you think is the odd one out. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, so bringing back, okay, 900, we're going to find 40% by dividing by 10 and timesing by 4. So that's going to be 90 times 4. That answer will be 360. Next question, 400 divided by 10 times by 9, okay, to find 90%. So we can have 40 times 9, so we're also going to have 360. The next one, 850 divided by 10 times by 6. That's going to give you 510 once you've done that calculation. It'll be 85 multiplied by 6 there, which I think is going to be the odd one out, but we better check. So 1,440. Now 25%, we did that towards the start, that's dividing by 4, it's quartering. So when you quarter and you halve and halve again, you will get 360. So the third one down, the 60% of 850 was the odd one out, and the explanation is showing your calculations, okay, showing the examiner that you can get those answers there, and that will be then your explanation. Right then, so what we've covered today is session 3, so percentages of non-calculator. Next week is going to be percentages but with calculator work, and then after that it's going to be the live session, and in that we're going to sort of be looking at using all the knowledge we've done so far and bringing in all our GCSE questions there as well. Okay, so next week now, percentages with a calculator. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.